we're going to be sad for like a minute. We're going to try to keep this respectful but short because we know Tripp would really want us to get to the fun. So, thank you.
I'm Oakley and I'm the oldest of the six.
My name is Elle and I'm the youngest.
And we figured we'd come up here so you guys can tell us apart. We stand right next to each other because we look most alike. We'd like to thank everyone for coming out to celebrate our dad. It means a lot to us. One of the quotes that comes to mind when I think of my dad is big people leave big holes. So that's what I'd like to leave you with.
I just want to say that I feel my dad's goal in life is always to make the people he loved as happy as possible. And I think we all know that he did just that with his life.
And thank you. And now we're going to introduce our grandfather, Papa, who is Tripp's father.
Well, I'm Papa. So, Woody, I want to thank everybody that's come here. I think the thing that really stands out is a couple things, but we're all connected by Tripp. And here, the bagpipes kind of supports, excuse me, our lineage. You know, we are Scotch-Irish, and it's only appropriate that we would have the bagpipes here. Before I get really started, I want to thank everybody again, which you've been thanked a few times, but Congressman Rob Whitman somehow went before Congress and presented Tripp's name, and I want to invite him up. He's our congressman for our area. Many of you in the same district. Come on up, Rob.
Thank you.
And Rob's going to kind of explain what he did, which I think is amazing. But anyway, so this is Rob. Thank you, Rob.
Woody, thank you so much. Well, Woody, thank you, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All right, let's try this one more time. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. All right, gosh, so many smiling faces here, all in remembrance of Tripp. You know, anybody that ever came across Tripp would forever know him. Tripp never had a stranger in his life. If you met him one time, you would always remember Tripp because of who he was and how he interacted with people. And I just remember so many special times where Tripp and I would cross paths, whether it's in Mechanicsville or someplace unexpected, whether it's down in the Middle Peninsula. It was pretty neat. He and I both enjoyed saltwater fishing and just enjoyed, you know, all the things that life had to offer. So I had the opportunity, a unique opportunity actually in Washington, where we are allowed to put things in the Congressional Record. The Congressional Record is actually a historical compilation of things of significance that happened in the United States, like the proceedings in Congress, or things that individuals do, or things that happen, special days. So I was able to go before the Congress and recognize Tripp. And the recognition of Tripp is now in the congressional record. It will be there forever, so it will be captured in the history of all the impacts that Tripp had across the spectrum. And what I was able to do is to go on the House floor there, and I stand and I ask to be recognized by the Speaker, and then the Speaker recognizes me. And I'd like to read to you this portion of the congressional record, and it's in a presentation piece, and then this is the page out of the actual congressional record. And on Thursday, February 11th, I rose and said, "Madam Speaker," and she recognized me, said, "Mr. Whitman," and I said, "Madam Speaker, it is with deep sadness that I rise today in honor of Tripp Hogg, who recently passed away. Tripp will be profoundly missed by his family, friends, and community, but his memory will live on for many, many years to come. Tripp was born on January 15, 1969 in Richmond, Virginia. He attended Lee Davis High School, where he graduated in 1987. Tripp graduated from East Carolina University in 1991, where he was a member of Sigma Phi Epsilon and president of his senior class. Go Pirates. Upon graduation from ECU, Tripp entered the real estate business in 1991 and joined his family's business, ERA Woody Hogg and Associates. Tripp has 3 children, Oakley, Delaney, and Elle. You saw two of those wonderful girls here, as well as 3 stepchildren, Mary Beth, Mandy, and Josh Ratchford. Tripp is also survived by his beloved wife, Kathy White Hogg, his sister, Elizabeth Hogg, and his brother, Jonathan Hogg, as well as his father, O. Woodland, as we know him, Woody Hogg, Jr., his mother, Susan Hogg, and stepmother, Pamela. Tripp was an extraordinarily caring individual who loved his family dearly, as well as his community, his commonwealth, and our nation. I fondly remember the conversations that we would have when we saw each other, whether it's in home improvement stores in the Mechanicsville area or elsewhere. He always began our conversation asking me how I was doing. I had the honor of hosting Tripp and his family on a personally guided tour of the United States Capitol, and I will forever treasure that memory. Tripp was always very active in his community, his church, and profession. He consistently ranked in the top 1% of all salespeople, both locally and nationally. Tripp was also an avid fisherman, and all you had to do is look on his wall to know that. He loved everything with salt water. Tripp's passion for service to those around him will be greatly missed by all who knew and loved him. I pray that God may bring peace to Tripp's friends and family as they grieve his loss, and that they may be comforted and reminded of their fond memories of Tripp during this time. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I ask that you rise with me today in remembrance of and to honor the life of Tripp Hogg. Would you like to present? And also, in honor of Tripp and in celebration of his life, there was a flag that was, yes, Kathy, come on up. That's right. Kathy, on behalf of a grateful nation, this flag was flown over the United States Capitol in honor and celebration of Tripp's life. There's a certificate here that denotes that, and I'd like to present to you, in honor of Tripp, in celebration of his life, a flag flown over the Capitol.
We did have a great tour of the Capitol with Rob. He is a lover of our country, a consummate historian, and really talks about how Virginia played such a role in this great country. And thank you again for your service. Not to be outdone by the national government, Scott Wyatt and Buddy Fowler and Ryan McDougall kind of went ahead and got something for the state of Virginia, so I'm going to invite those 3 up here if they would, and they can tell you about that award that Tripp got for the state. By the way, this is about the only way that I'm going to ever get mentioned in the state.
At this time, I would like to invite the family up here. When we present commending resolutions or memorial resolutions on the House floor, actually the families come those days and they're actually be presented. This is resolution in honor of Tripp's life. And I want to share one Tripp story with the family that it was at one of the oyster roasts that they had over at their office. And Tripp had told me one day, he goes, you know, I'm more conservative than my dad. And I shared that with Woody, and he goes, he is. So I want to thank you. It's a picture was shared with me of the wall down at the beach house now with his sailfish and his marlin and all the saltwater citations. So I know when y'all go to the beach, he will be there with you in memory. And Tripp was so giving to the community and so supportive, and by the number of people here that he touched so many of our lives. So I want to sincerely thank you for sharing Tripp with us in our lives. So this memorial resolution was introduced to the Speaker of the House and presented on the House floor on February 4th, 2021 by Delegate Scott White and Delegate Buddy Fowler. It was then agreed to in the Senate and introduced to the President of the Senate by our State Senator Ryan McDougal on February the 11th, 2021. House Joint Resolution 711. It states, whereas Oakley W. Hogg III, an esteemed realtor and beloved member of the Hanover County community, passed on January 24th, 2021. And whereas Oakley W. Tripp Hogg III was a proud alumni of East Carolina University, from which he graduated in 1991, and where he was a member of Sigma Epsilon and served as their class president, And whereas Tripp Hogg was a well-known and respected realtor in Hanover County, facilitating the sale of thousands of homes in the region with Tripp Hogg Realty team of ERA Woody Hogg and Associates. And whereas Tripp was an avid outdoorsman, enjoying fishing, hunting, golfing, and being on the water. And whereas Tripp Hogg will fondly be remembered and dearly missed by his loving wife Kathy, his children Oakley, Delaney, Ellie, his stepchildren Mary Beth, Mandy, and Josh, his mother Susan, his father and stepmother Oakley or Woody and Pam, and numerous other family members and friends that we see here today. Therefore, be it resolved by the Virginia House of Delegates and the Virginia Senate concurring that the General Assembly hereby note with great sadness the loss of Oakley W. Hogg III, a cherished member of the Hanover County community, where unwavering kindness and generosity touched countless lives. And therefore, be resolved further that the clerk of the Virginia House of Delegates has prepared a copy of this resolution to be presented to the family on this day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I didn't know Tripp and Woody as well as I would have liked to, but the last time I saw Tripp Hogg, we were walking out of the field where we'd been quail hunting. And of course, we both share the love of the outdoors, and and I'm just sorry we're not going to be able to do that again, but I will tell you this, I'm sure Woody and I will do it again, but every time I go bird hunting, I'll probably be thinking of Tripp somewhere along the way. So again, it was just a pleasure to know him, and I just thank the family for that privilege. Thank you.
We're just so privileged to be a part of this today, and I really had not planned to speak. I was going to let my House colleagues do that, but Oakley, your comments really struck me. My father died 8 years ago, and there's not many days that go by that I don't think about him. So you will always have that hole in your heart. But what he gave to you through his life is something that can never be replicated, and you will be able to pass that on. Each of you are the children you are today. You have the experiences you have, and you will have the impact not only on us, but on the rest of the world because of him. So thank you for sharing this time with us, and it does get easier as time goes by, but you will never forget.
So I want to just kind of talk about Tripp a little bit, which might be the most difficult time. But you know, when he was 3, he was thinking about working on houses. We bought a house on Floyd Avenue, and we're in there, and we used to tear the fronts off and paint the houses. And so we were wondering where Tripp was, and so he's like 3 or 4, and so we're like, he's out there, and he's painting away on the next door neighbor. And it was oil-based paint on brick. But he dodged a bullet because the neighbor came out and said, you know, we like so much what you're doing, we're going to do the same thing. So, and then so around 6, probably 7 maybe or 8, whatever it was, we moved to the Reeve Manor, and he met his lifelong friend Brent. And they were partners in crime, somewhat. Although, you know, one day they came home, and I come to my garage, and there's all these iron bars laying in the garage. I said, where did y'all get these? He said, they're all over. He said, they're really hard to get out of the ground. Well, they pulled up a whole pile of survey stakes. Every corner in the lot, and that's pretty expensive today. So I don't know, because Tripp blamed Brett and Brett blamed Tripp. But so I thought I knew the developer pretty well. I'd go over and kind of take them there, and he'd really teach them a lesson. So I go over there, and his name was Bob Jeter, and he had been long past. Some of you know Bob. And so Mr. Jeters gets those 2 out, and I'm hoping he lays down the law and tells them what, you know, criminals they were. He said, oh, boys, don't worry about it. I was young when we used to do that kind of stuff. And so there was no lesson there. And then I heard something, they decided they were going to disassemble a foundation or 2 in Marie that put the bricks in it down. So anyway, so Tripp was off to, he became a great, he was very handy. I think we lived near a lake, and he got the fishing bug, and probably when he was old enough to sit in the boat. He was more at that stage of a collector of fishing gear, but it stuck, and him and Brent fished a lot, and of course he went to the saltwater, and he loved the saltwater, and he did as I think Leon mentioned that we did put a couple of his mounts down in our house at the banks, at the Outer Banks, and thanks to Gary Finnegan and who's a friend who was there and helped mount those. So as time went on, you know, Tripp was wide open. He did everything flat out. You know, he got into tennis. He was vicious with the tennis racket. He would break strings. Lizzie played tennis. She was a ranked tennis player. She never broke a string, but she was a good player. Tripp would break a string a week. He would wear his shoes, drag his toes, and he became a really good tennis player. Then it came to golf. You know, he was kind of self-taught. He got down to close to a 2 handicapper at one time. Some of his golfing buddies are going to miss him in the captain choice because he's 300 yards down the middle, and in spite of that, he could putt and he could chip. So everything he did, Tripp went at it hard, whether it be sports or business or his family. He was wide open. So when he went to East Carolina, which is where I went, he followed in the footprints. He joined the same fraternity, which was Sigma Phi Epsilon. And I'd like to invite Steve Gillum, where are you, Steve? Up. We have, when Tripp passed away, a couple of the granddaughters and the family decided we need to do an endowment fund. So we started an endowment fund. Many of you have already donated to that, and we really appreciate it. So the SIG-Eps, like they would do for their fellow brothers, they've been out there raising some funds, and we've raised about 32,000 so far. We hope to raise about 100,000. And I'm gonna let Steve. This is Steve Gillum. Steve is a partner in a CPA firm, and they're buddies. So.
Okay, those are 2 or 3 very tough acts to follow.
but I'll do my best. I'm going to consider myself the pregame. I know we've got the eulogies and some really good detailed stories coming up with Tripp. But Kathy asked me to speak about the endowment and scholarship fund for Tripp, but she also gave me permission to talk a little bit about Tripp, which I certainly took her up on. So I'm not going to get into too many details. A lot of the stories are probably best left untold, but there are a lot of good stories. So I met Tripp his freshman year, my sophomore year, when we pledged SIG Up together. Tripp was always one that would take charge, and even with our pledge class, he was our pledge class president. So he led us on numerous adventures with our pledge class, which if you look around, you see these shirts. There's a lot of SIG Ups here that came from far away to represent Tripp. But from that point forward, our lives would forever be intertwined. After we graduated from college, we bought season tickets together. Back then, East Carolina we were having some down years, but we held our season tickets and still have them together for over the past 25 years. In the early days, we liked to mix, when we were younger, we liked to mix golf and football. And there were many weekends where Tripp and I would get up at the crack of dawn, drive to Greenville, play around the golf, tailgate, go to a football game, and then try to make it home the next day. And certainly with Tripp, no game was ever complete without at least having some Parker's barbecue or Chico's, and sometimes it was both. Tripp and I made many road trips with football. To name a few, we went to numerous trips to the Liberty Bowl in Memphis, the Papa John's Bowl in Birmingham, the Military Bowl in D.C., and probably one of the more memorable ones, the Gallery Furniture Bowl in Houston, where Tripp and I entered the Gallery Furniture Bowl golf tournament, and we actually were the golf champions. The only problem with that was I think Pam and Woody actually had to take us to the game because we weren't in very good shape to drive ourselves to the game. Certainly there are many fond memories with Tripp on the golf course. He was hands down every year my member guest partner. There are several championship trophies, including a number from the SIG Up alumni events. We even played golf on the day that Elle was born. He told me that his present to himself for Elle being born was a new set of clubs. And so we went out and broke them in. And Tripp would be proud for me to bring this one up. I am proud to say that I witnessed one of the most rare feats in golf around with Tripp Hogg. He made what you call an albatross. And for you non-golfers out there that may not be familiar with an albatross, that is making a 2 on a par 5. And Tripp was about 240 yards out and hit a great shot towards the green. And when we got up, we searched for his ball for like 5 minutes. We looked in the bunker, we looked over the green, and then finally someone said, well, did anybody check the cup? Lo and behold. So that is actually more rare than a hole-in-one. Tripp was responsible for me landing in Richmond. He introduced me to my business partner, Frank Jenkins. And I said in the beginning, our lives are intertwined. And as I stand here today, I'm proud that Oakley Hogg is an associate at our firm. He also gave my brother-in-law, Jeremy Roberts, his start in real estate as his buyer's agent. And we were business partners in a number of different business ventures. And probably our favorite part of those business ventures was our so-called annual shareholder meeting that we would do every January, where we would pick a very nice restaurant and go have our business dinner. Tripp was a groomsman in my wedding, and Oakley was actually a flower girl in my wedding. I visited with Tripp after the birth of each of his 3 girls, and he visited me after the birth of each of my 3 boys. All 3 of my boys admired Tripp. They looked up to him. In our household, he was affectionately known as Boss. His uncanny ability to take charge of a situation. Even last summer, he took them on their first offshore fishing trip, which I think Tripp actually enjoyed that more. But it was also Delaney's first time offshore with us as well. So that was extra special. One of my favorite stories about Tripp is being around Tripp quite a bit. Tripp thought that he was going to be a boy dad. And he had 3 girls. And I actually asked Tripp when we were on that round of golf, after Elle was born, if he was going to try for a 4th. And he said, "I am not paying for 4 weddings." But little did Tripp know, even though he thought he wanted to be a boy dad, he was really meant to be a girl dad. The family really nailed it when they established a scholarship fund in Tripp Hogg's name. There is no bigger Pirate fan out there than Tripp Hogg. And as Woody mentioned, with the amount that has already been raised, I don't know, money is still coming in. The SIGAP group is going to be adding to that fund shortly after the ceremony. Our SIGAP group raised approximately $6,000, and when we add that to the total, that'll bring it up to nearly $40,000. So I can't think of a better way to memorialize Tripp. But I'd like to end with one last Tripp story. So on the annual shareholder meeting that we had this past January, we did it at Buckhead's, and I'm so glad we did it even during COVID. And when the waiter came around to take our drink order, Tripp and I normally get a bourbon, and I ordered a Blanton's, and Tripp had not heard of Blanton's. So I'm like, "Tripp, you've got to try Blanton's," which he did. And so he enjoyed it, and we talked a little bit about it, and I said, "Well, it is a little bit hard to get. You have to hunt for it." And Tripp said, "Oh, this is like really good stuff. You know, I'm glad you've introduced me to Blanton's." And so I know from Cammie the next week that he heard a shipment was coming to Richmond. He had her going one way, and I think Tripp was going the other way. But I was actually able to secure a bottle for Tripp because I knew that he really wanted a bottle of Blanton's. And so I'd actually given this very bottle to Oakley to give to her dad. So it was my intent to be able to enjoy this with Tripp. And so I couldn't think of a better occasion than to crack the top. Tripp Hogg, this is to you, buddy.
You remind me of something. Tripp was down there and enjoying the full life of fraternity life, and he came home one day and he said, "I needed a pair of shoes." And so I reluctantly gave him my credit card. You mentioned Chico's. Chico's is a restaurant and a bar, and I'd like to see, there's quite a few cigarettes here. How many of you got a drink that Tripp bought with my credit card? So I had a hard time retrieving that credit card because he was the life of the party, apparently, at Chico's. So anyway, but makes a good story. So, but thank you so much, Steve, and all his brothers for what you're doing and what you've done. So, moving on a little bit with Tripp real quickly, there's a lot of things we can say about Tripp, but, he did come into the real estate business, and actually he struggled for about the first 6 months, and then he took off like a rocket. He was probably, he was our top realtor in the company, and he was probably one of the top realtors in Richmond, and he served a lot of people that are sitting in the audience, as he made friends with his clients, and so many of you have come up to me particularly, and I've heard it before, but really after his passing, that the stories that I heard about the things that Tripp had done for his clients was way far and above what the normal realtor would have done for them. So Tripp was he was my son, he was my buddy, he was my hunting buddy, he was my pirate buddy. We went to all the games together. He was, in 2007, the market collapsed, real estate market. So, and I started flipping, I didn't call it flipping back then, but I started buying houses back in 1969. And we would renovate them and sell them. And I was making more money doing that than I was making in my job at the bank. Tripp loved that, and he was really good at it. So about 2007, I'm handling a lot of foreclosures, and I go out and I see these houses, and interest rates are going down, and rents are going up, and I said, these are on sale. So we started flipping houses, and Tripp absolutely loved flipping houses. I mean, he had the eye. Another Lizzie's over there. She and I are flipping houses now, and she's got the eye. They're designed. Their eye for fixing a house up is. I'm more about the bottom line, but anyway, we flipped a lot of houses, and of course, got my other children, and I had my agents involved, and anyway, so but Tripp, he died at 52, and I want to, some of you, I get people coming up to me and they don't know how Tripp died. People say, did he die of cancer? Did he have a heart attack? And I'm just going to quickly kind of go through what happened. I had gallbladder out years ago, and I went into the doctor twice, or hospital twice. Third time they said, oh, it's not your gallbladder. That was at 7 o'clock. It's at 2:30 in the morning. They said it's your gallbladder. So they took it out. And about 2 months later, I had pancreatitis, and people came up and said they thought you were going to die. And I'm like, no, I wasn't going to die. I had no intention of dying. Well, Tripp had both of those at one time. And your gallbladder, and I may get this wrong, so people in the medical field can kind of, but correct me if I'm wrong, but your pancreas and your gallbladder share the same bile duct that allows you to secrete a lot of bad stuff out of your body, both of them. A small gallstone, they sometimes get that big, but it was a small one, jumped out of his gallbladder and got lodged in that bile duct and stopped him up. And when it did, his pancreas was expanded because it couldn't excrete whatever was coming out of it, and it burst, it ruptured. And when that happened, within minutes, every major organ in his body shut down. So, although he only lived 52 years, he crammed the whole lifetime into those 52 years. Excuse me. I'm blessed to have him as a son. Sorry, I wouldn't be able to do this, but so I hope you never. I know there's probably a couple people in the audience who've lost a child. It is hard, and here I am in the late in the fourth quarter of my life, and I'm up here standing about the death of my son. So I hope you never have that. But Tripp was a joy, and he loved Kathy immensely. He was the happiest, and I'll say one last thing. He was the happiest I'd ever seen him in his life the week he died. I happened to go, Pam had a back operation, so I had to go in the office to sign some papers, and I was lucky enough to come down the steps when he was coming in. He looked like $1 million. That was on Friday. Ironically, the last thing he told me, and this is something that Mark Nankis is out there somewhere, he said, "Dad, I got a duck for you." Mark Nankis gave it to me. And that was the last thing he said to me. And we sure enjoyed, we had some great times in the duck blind. So thank you again. I know I'm rambling, but I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Hi everyone, my name is Tripp Hogg. I am the middle of the family, really. I'm the middle child between Oakley and Elle, and I'm the second oldest of the 6 children that make up the Hogg-Ratchford group. I wrote a little something. I wasn't really prepared, but let's just act like I was. When I think about my dad, there are a few key words that really come to mind. He was very persistent. I think anyone who knew him knew that. He was loving, dependable, and I think I see this side of him very much, but competitive is something that I will always see him as. He was by far the most competitive person I think I've ever met, and I know that because I was the daughter that was into sports, and I would play just about every sport, and he would watch, and I'd go fishing with him, and I was the one that did those things with him, and I got to see this competitive side of him, and he also got to see it with me. The competitive side of my dad has mostly been witnessed in our family mini golf tournaments, and if you're wondering what that looks like, there is a competitive bracket and a non-competitive bracket. And so it would be Dad, me, Oakley, and usually Mary Beth would make up the competitive group, and then everybody else would kind of fall into the group that didn't really care, just wanted to have fun, and not everyone played that way. So that was how I mostly saw him as an athlete, and I think in seeing him as that, I can only imagine what he's like as an athlete playing actual golf or a real sport that's not just a family vacation game. So I tried just about every sport growing up, but the one that stuck was soccer. And I like to think of my soccer years, an okay one, but the natural course of any sport, and specifically with soccer, is you start in rec league, you move up to travel, you play school ball, and you kind of naturally proceed through this way of playing the sport and just keep leveling up as you're able to. And so when I started playing rec league, I then kind of moved up to travel, and I was put on a co-ed team, and I was very small, and my dad, while very busy, he showed up to every single game, win or lose. I lost every single game for years on this team, and he would always still show up. When I was in middle school, or maybe shortly after in high school, I started going to travel league and started playing school ball more, and he still showed up even for the wins, but he showed up win or lose for every single game. Win or lose, my dad always showed up for me, even when it was really tough, and he's a team player, and I feel like that's not something I would naturally associate with my dad just because he was so competitive, but he was a team player in that he was someone you wanted on your team. And if he was on your team, you knew that he had your back. He showed up for the people that he cared about, and he wouldn't take no for an answer if he had the opportunity to help someone. My dad had a really big team, and I think that everyone here is a part of it. And I just want to thank you all for coming. Thank you so much for coming, and my grandma, Susan Hogg, is going to come up next and do a scripture reading for everyone. Thank you.
I hope you can hear me. Can you?
Yes.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for coming to the celebration of Tripp's life. I would like to start out with Psalm 139:14. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works. Well, and I would like to say that Tripp was fearfully and wonderfully made, and he demonstrated that truth every day. For years, my prayer for Tripp had been that he would be a godly man in his heart, in his home, and in his community. I believe God answered that prayer. One Thanksgiving, it was in 2018, I walked in, and the first thing Tripp said to me was, "We've got to pray right now because Brian Berry is in surgery," and he was, and we prayed. That was the first thing that we did that day. God puts desires in our heart. You know, Psalm 37:4 says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart." Well, God had given Tripp a desire to catch like 9 different fish. And really, I mean, in some of these, one of them he had to go to Costa Rica. He caught most of them. But I just thought that that was pretty neat, that, you know, that God gave him that desire, and he went in pursuit of that desire. When Tripp was growing up, he was the quarterback of his football team. He was about this high or so. Anyway, it was a normal thing for him to score 1 or 2 touchdowns and extra points. And one time, my mother and dad came up here from North Carolina to watch him. And that day, Tripp scored 5 touchdowns and 2 extra points. That's how Tripp was. And my dad couldn't stop bragging about him. But Tripp just, he knew how to excel. And anyway, Tripp did go to East Carolina, and he was president of his senior class, and he gave the graduating speech. And I was one proud mama. We were all so proud of him. God had put something down in Tripp that was unique and very special. And that's why I say he is fearfully and wonderfully made. And everybody in this room is fearfully and wonderfully made. So I hope you will know that when you leave here today. He was a very creative person. Not only did he do the flip houses, you could call him Mr. Flip because he was really good. He knew how to take something, like in a good location, a house that was in neglect or needed repair, and he knew how to make it beautiful. Tripp also was very patriotic. He loved his country, and he loved his family, and he loved his wife, Kathy. Thank you for the 4 wonderful years you gave my son. And you know, he was there. I know I used to call him, and probably sometimes I depended on him too much, but he had a lot of wisdom about things. He just knew how to do stuff, and I was very proud of him. And the night he died, I remember thinking, I knew where he was going, and I knew I would see him again, because even though his body is not living anymore, his spirit will live forever. And I will see him again. And if anybody in this room is born again, you will see Tripp again. I hope it will be. Okay, my notes are kind of jumbled up, but anyway. Jeremiah 29:11. God knows the thoughts and plans he has for each one of us and the purposes. And, you know, we all expected Tripp to live much longer than he did. But, you know, apparently that was his time, and there is a time for everything. So, there are many more scriptures I could tell, but I just want to say this one thing. Tripp lived life well, and he loved his wife and family, his children and all his family. He had good common sense about things. He was generous. He was a good cook. And when he installed that outdoor kitchen at their house, he made delicious ribs. And he was very creative. I mean, he could make things like wreaths. And I had this wreath of an angel. And I used to bring it out at Christmas. And I thought one year, why in the world am I saving it just for Christmas? So it's on my door now all the time. And it's beautiful. I mean, I guess you just wouldn't expect a man to do that kind of thing. It was wonderful. Tripp was sociable. He loved his neighbors, and I believe that they loved him. And I said he's patriotic, loved his country, he loved history. And Ecclesiastes 3:12 says, it talks about a man rejoicing in doing good in his life. and Tripp did good in his life. And I was thankful that God allowed me to be Tripp's mother for 52 years. To God be the glory. May he be glorified today in this group. Thank y'all.
Hi guys, I'm Mary Beth. I'm Kathy's oldest. Thank you all so much for being here today. I'd have to say out of the bunch, I am definitely the hippie child of the family, so I guess you could say Tripp and I had our differences. Despite those differences though, we did have one big thing in common, and it's that we were both happiest when we were by the water. Some of my favorite memories with Tripp is when we were spending time by the bay or we were on family vacation. And if any of you have ever been by the water with him, you know what I'm talking about. He's so happy. And I'm just really grateful that I got to spend those 5 years making amazing memories with him. Yeah. So next we have Tripp's lifelong best friend, Brent Bosher. Please welcome him to the stage.
All right, so we're obviously here today to celebrate the life of Oakley Woodland Hogg III. Now Tripp, quite an impact on our community as evidenced by this crowd. And his spirit is right here with us, I'll guarantee. Now, because this is obviously Tripp's kind of party. Now if he were here, he'd be wanting to make sure that you had something cold in one hand and maybe something warm, probably smoked, some of that wonderful barbecue in the other. He would be here tactically dividing his time among each group, each person, to be sure that he got to tell you, hey, good to see you. Glad you could make it. He wanted to make sure that you felt welcome. I personally knew Tripp for 45 years. He was the first Mechanicsville friend that I ever had. And not too much time from the time we were 8 years old until early 2021 that there wasn't some kind of contact. He was a great friend and I loved him. I made the innocent mistake of thinking that Tripp was just so good to me because we were buds. And what I found after his passing, Tripp was just good to everybody. I learned this from reactions to my Facebook post expressing my sudden feelings of loss. I received heartfelt phone calls and messages from good friends of mine that I didn't even know knew him. The comments, though different, had a similar context. Man, I'll never forget the time I asked Tripp for help. He dropped everything to help me. Others said he called me when I was sick, and he kept calling me until he knew I was better. Others said he called me for advice. And the common theme among all of those people, every single one of them, you know, after that, he would call me every so often just to see how I was doing. He would check up on me, see if I was feeling well, see how my family was, see if I needed any more help, or seeing if I needed any more advice. Despite how busy he was, and we know Tripp was busy, wide open, he took the time to help people in need and to care for those around him. His energy and passion had few equals, the likes of which I've never seen. And along with that energy and passion and confidence, there was somehow a sense of humility there. Now, I went to Tripp's college graduation weekend at East Carolina. I went to ODU, but hey, go Pirates. So when I arrived at his house, he wasn't there. And I'd been there before, so I let myself in, made myself at home. What would you do? Probably went to the fridge, maybe. And then I hear his voice coming from the other room, but it sounded weird. I'm like, what's he talking about? So I go in the other room where I could hear his voice. My man Tripp was on the TV. It was the news highlights showing the East Carolina University graduation from earlier that day. The highlight was the senior class president of 1991 breaking it down for the graduates. I didn't know what to say. Senior class president, pretty big deal. He never mentioned it to me. I never knew it. He just did Tripp stuff, and I love him for it. Now, that energy and passion was obvious to anyone who'd ever seen him work or play. Tripp was all in all the time. Baseball, softball, duck hunting, East Carolina, anything. If they had a curling team, he'd have probably been into that. Sig up, strong work guys. Bill fishing, golf, grilling, or real estate. He was everywhere, and he made friends everywhere he went. As a matter of fact, when it came to real estate, I guess some of the treasured friendships that are represented here today may have evolved from his position as an agent, because he impacted many lives. I witnessed it with my own eyes. He was a fierce defender of his clients. And his knowledge of his trade, his passion to help others, and his investment in people was electric. And I know that it'd be far better to be sitting next to Tripp at one of those negotiating tables than sitting across from him. Because if you were sitting across from him, you weren't going to get a curveball by him, because he was going to wait and take it to right field. You weren't going to get one by his clients, because he knew the business and he was a defender of his clients. And if you were that other agent, you probably, when the deal was done, you probably had a sense of accomplishment, because you had gone against one of the very best in the business. And, despite all those negotiations, there were probably some pretty tense ones at times, I would think. Never heard him say a cross word against not one of those other folks. So all that passion and energy I keep talking about? Yeah, there was one facet of Tripp's life where that light shone a little brighter than the rest. His love, energy, enthusiasm for his family were beyond measure, especially when it came to raising 3 beautiful daughters in his family. And regarding his family, as Woody alluded, there's a whole lot of memories, and I have to tell some stories, as a sidebar, but I'm not going to do that here. But, one of the memories about Tripp and being around his family was that Christmas feast that he would make. To see him during the Christmas preparing feverishly for that year's feast was just a hoot. He was always making something complex. It wasn't something simple. It was complex, and he was making something special to make memories, show his family how important they were to him, and as always, if you know Tripp, trying to outdo himself. So today we're going to celebrate the life of Tripp Hogg the way he would want us to. And when we leave here, I ask that we remember how in the midst of his busy life, Tripp took the time to make us feel special. That gift and his love of people is something I will seek to pay forward for the rest of my life. And while that was special, the greatest gift I ever received from him wasn't actually for me. In early September 2006, I was at a low point. I was dealing with a family loss of my own. And in the midst of that tragedy, on Sunday, September 3rd, 2006, I was turning 38. But my birthday didn't matter that year. What matters when I got to church that Sunday on my birthday, one of my dearest friends in the world was there in a white robe. Tripp had accepted Jesus as his Lord, and on that Sunday he would be baptized at Cool Spring Baptist Church. That baptism was a public show of his decision to accept Christ. Like I said, that gift wasn't for me. But it's special because I know my dear friend is with Jesus right now, and I will get to see him again in glory. Tripp Hogg was an outstanding human being. He was a great son, brother, father, husband, uncle, friend, and co-worker. And he is undoubtedly the best and kindest pirate that I will ever see.
Hi, I'm Josh. I'm Tripp's only stepson, or only son in general. And I'm supposed to be introducing someone, but I have a few words of my own I'd like to say before. Is that Tripp and I, we used to butt heads more than anybody in the house, and anyone over at that table will tell you. And no matter what was going on during that period of time, Tripp, with all the arguments and everything, made it clear for one thing, and that is how to be a man, and that is something that I didn't have a full understanding of before I moved in over there and was in Doncaster Court. And that's something I have to be very thankful of, because over the span of a few years, that is something that's going to serve me really well for the rest of my life. And I'd like to introduce Kevin Stavridis.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for coming. Tripp and I met his freshman year. I was a sophomore. We met at SIGEP Rush, and we became friends instantly. It was like we had known each other for 10 years. He was like a brother from a different mother that I never really had, because all I had was a sister at the time. But we quickly found out we had quite a bit in common, and some of these things you've probably already heard today in some of these speeches about Tripp, which won't surprise you when I mention to you, but we had this love for shopping for clothes and for shoes. I got that from my mother. I don't know where Tripp got it from, but anyway. But we always wanted to make sure we were the best dressed guys in the fraternity. So much that oftentimes I'd go into our closet, because we roomed together, and my tie that I was going to wear that day was gone. And it was this significant purple and gold tie that my mom had got me when I got accepted to East Carolina. We were both very athletic. I know you can't tell that now from me, but we played a lot of sports. We both have family from, I had everybody on my dad's side of the family was from Richmond. And of course, Tripp knew someone in my family. Go figure, Mr. I don't know a stranger. We both loved Budweiser beer at that time, and then as time went on, we had a refrigerator in our fraternity room we took the shelves out so we could stack more beer in there. It was all Budweiser. They called us the Bud Boys. And then later on, as times got a little bit tighter, we had to switch to a little bit less expensive beer called Milwaukee's Best. But anyway, this is going to shock you. Tripp and I were both very competitive. Every day was a competition with he and I. And I'll talk about some of those in a minute. And he had a lot of pride. He was a very proud person. He was proud. He was proud to be a Hogg. Especially Oakley, Woodland, Hogg the Third. He let you know it. He bragged about being the third, second generation pirate. He was proud to be the SIGEP legacy of his dad, who started the fraternity we were in. He was proud to be from Virginia, and he let you know about that too. And as you heard, he was very patriotic, proud of his country. But more than anything, he was proud of his girls. He bragged about them whenever we talked or whenever we met, and we spent a lot of time together. But anyway, since meeting, when we first met, we did a lot of stuff together. We were, along with a couple of the guys, Steve Gillum, who you met a few minutes ago, and Robert Whitfield, we were pledged together with a few other good close friends of ours, Tom Daphne as well. And we all kind of hung out together. And Tripp and I, we pledged together. He was the president, and he taught me into running to be his vice president for whatever reason. I don't know. I was like, whatever, Tripp. We roomed together for 2.5, 3 years in the fraternity house. We went to formals together. We were roommates at the formals. We celebrated our 21st birthdays together. He doesn't remember his, I don't remember mine, but we tailgated during school, we tailgated after, graduating from college. And believe it or not, Mr. and Mrs. Hogg, we actually studied together at times. We shopped a lot together. We like to shop. I don't know what the deal was about that, but it seemed like we at UBE, University Book Exchange in Greenville, we had this fascination about trying to outbuy the other person on UBE, East Carolina stuff, and at Brody's, the men's shop in Greenville. He was quick to pull out someone's credit card and buy those shoes. We were groomsmen at each other's weddings. We got married about a month apart from each other. We traveled to football games. We went to a couple of in-state, out-of-state rivalry games. We went to the Liberty Bowl. We had a competition, me, Steve, and Tripp. I like to say that I came in second, but really that might have been better than Tripp, because Tripp passed out before I did. So
Before the game.
Before the game, yes. It was a 10 o'clock game because of the time change. And we started about 7:30 in the morning. So, but how do I condense 34 years into 5 or 6 minutes? You talk about someone like Tripp Hogg. I'll tell you a couple quick funny stories and then a couple serious ones. Tripp had this kind of fascination, the fact that I'm Greek and the fact that I was in a fraternity, and as he called it, I was Greek. And he used to pride himself as I was walking across campus, whether I was by myself or somebody else or whatever, he would yell out as loud as he could, "Hey, Greek!" Of course, I knew it was me. I mean, recognized Tripp's voice. He had that little grin on his face, And if we were in a crowd, especially if I was trying to talk to a girl or whatever, he had the tendency to come up and say, "Hey, Greek," and then the girl would go, "Why does he call you Greek? Are you? It's because you're in a fraternity with him?" And I was like, and Tripp was, push me out of the way and say, "No, he's Greek. He's Greek, like, Zeus, and he's in a fraternity." The other thing he liked to ask girls, and that embarrassed me, I think, was, "Hey, do you like Greek food?" And he would wink at me, that little grin that he had. Anything to kind of, get one up on me. But one thing, even though we were very competitive, Tripp had this thing, and this is, I guess it gets in line with the girl thing of our shopping thing, but he never wanted to go to bed angry at me. And I was like, "What do you mean?" So one time we got into this argument about something I can't tell you for the life of me what it was about, but we literally didn't talk the whole day. And we shared the same room at the fraternity house, and you thought it was like a married couple, angry at each other. We didn't talk, and finally got up in our lofts. We had 2 lofts in our room, and after about 20 minutes, he goes, "Staff, you awake?" I said, "Yeah." He's like, "I'm sorry. I was kind of explicit today, and I just want to tell you, I'm sorry, and we should never go to bed angry at each other." It's a true story. I said, "Okay, dear." So, again, I mentioned we were competitive. We always had to try to outdress each other. Who could buy more at UBE? I mentioned all that. We even had a competition of how late we could sleep in at our fraternity house and still somehow miraculously get to our 9 a.m. marketing class before the teacher locked the door on us. And that became a weekly kind of competition. I mean, and if you saw what we wore and how bad we smelled from the night before, you'd probably wonder how the professor let us in to begin with. But that was just one of many competitions we had. My wife always said, you 2 guys are more like a couple of girls than you are fraternity brothers. So we talked all the time after we both graduated from college, in between our visits at East Carolina for football games or traveling. And there's two big conversations that I remember more so than anything with Tripp that I will remember for the rest of my life, and I have shared these two stories hundreds of times. The first one was when Tripp's first daughter was born, Oakley. He called me just a few hours after she was born. And of course, you know, my wife is pregnant with our first that was delivered a few months later. And of course, Tripp got married before me, had a kid before me, so it was one of those competition things. He called me, he's like, Staff, we had the baby. And I said, everybody's healthy, safe? Yeah, 10 fingers, 10 toes, the whole 9 yards. But I gotta explain to you what it's like. And he went on to try to explain and verbalize to me what it was like, and he said, I can't. It's the most amazing miracle I've ever witnessed in my life. And Tripp was rambling. I could see him, you know, talking with his hands. He's as us Greeks talking with their hands. And he said, all I can tell you is you'll know what I'm talking about when your firstborn is born. So sure enough, a few months later, my daughter Zoe was born, and I'm there playing catcher, and she was born. And after I called on my local friends and family, I called Tripp. It was late at night. I said, Tripp, I know exactly what you mean now. It's the most unbelievable miracle I've ever witnessed in my life. I can't wait for the next one. Of course, my wife told me to shut the hell up and put that pistol back in the holster, she said. The other, and I told that story to a lot of my friends who were my age or younger, who were having kids for the first time, and they would call me and tell me the same thing that I told Tripp. So I cherish that story that Tripp told me more than I can ever talk about. The other one was about 5 or 6 years ago, our friend Steve's dad passed away. We went to the funeral. And during the funeral, one of his best friends from East Carolina that he was best friends with in college, a guy named Ron Vassar, got up and spoke. And you could tell that Ron Vassar and Jerry Gillum were best of friends, much like Tripp and Steve and I, and many of the other fraternity brothers that we had formed friendships with. As Mr. Hogg called us, the Three Musketeers or something. Well, they probably called us a few other names behind our back. But we were extremely tight, the three of us. And Ron Vassar gave his long speech, so I'll try to make mine short. And I kept thinking, God, what a great friendship those two gentlemen had. And after the funeral and after the reception, Tripp was burning up my phone. He must have called me 6 or 7 times, back to back to back, to the point where I got a little nervous, thought maybe something happened. He was traveling back to Richmond, I was traveling back to Raleigh. So I called him, I was like, what is going on, dude? And he called me like 7 times. Are you okay? He's like, yeah. I was here listening to Jerry talk, Ron talk about Jerry. And I'm thinking, that's me, you, and Steve. I said, yeah, I had a similar thought process. He said, but you understand, they were like best friends. We're like best friends. But you and Steve are more than best friends to me. You're like my brother. He's not only fraternity brother, that's a given. And he said, I just want to tell you something. I said, all right. He goes, I love you. I said, yeah, Tripp. He goes, no, I don't mean like I love you like the bud guy. Like, I love you, beer guy. He said, I mean, I love you like a person, like a family member, like my own flesh and blood. I never thought I could love someone the way I love you and Steve. And he said, tell me. I said, I love you too, Tripp. He said, I mean it. So every conversation we had from then and since then, whether it was in person or on the phone, Tripp would not let me leave or hang up without telling me he loved me. I mean, literally, he'd say, I love you. He looked me right in the face. And he wouldn't let go or let me leave until I said, Tripp, I love you too, man. And it was genuine, okay? And I did love him. A I talked to him on his birthday this past January. We always called each other for birthdays or anniversaries or whatever. Or to brag about his daughters, or me to brag about my kids. I gotta tell you one quick thing. So, my wife Gina and I have 2 children of our own, and after we had our second one, which was a boy, she goes, "You want any more?" And I said, "No." She goes, "Why?" I said, "Because I beat Tripp Hogg." Finally, I beat Tripp Hogg or something. I got a boy before he did. So we're stopping at 2. But anyway, I called him for his birthday, and we talked for a while. And he said, "Staff, you know what I'm going to say, right?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I love you." And I said, "I love you too." That was the last time I talked to Tripp. But I'm thankful that he made me tell him that I love him. So in closing, I want to thank Mr. and Mrs. Hogg for raising such a fine young man. There's no doubt he made us all better. He pushed us. He pushed me when I was in school in sports and at the bar. He pushed me a few times. Kathy, thank you for letting me speak today. I needed this. Mr. Hogg, thanks for that credit card that night. Anyway, so anyway, getting back to the story Tripp said, I said, "Well, Tripp, we're not going to have to worry about it for another 30 or 40 years. I said, because I'm doomed to live to be 100 due to some family lineage or whatever you want to call it. And I said, so we'll talk about that story in about 50 years. So Tripp, in 47 years, I'll see you, and I'll bring the Budweiser. And no more Milwaukee's best, brother. I love you.
Hi everyone. My name is Mandy. I'm the middle child of Kathy's. You guys got me all choked up here and I have to sing, so I'm trying to keep it short and simple. By the way, I'm going to be singing Over the Rainbow, just in case you guys are wondering. Tripp would want me to do this. This was like the one thing we had in common was music, so I want to do this for him. You got it. You got it. Somewhere over the rainbow. Wake up where the clouds are far behind me. Oh, well, trouble melts like a lemon raindrops high above the chimney top. That's where you'll find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow. Bluebirds fly, and the dreams that you dare to, oh why can't I, someday I wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind me. Trouble melts like lemon drops high above the chimney top. That's where you'll find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. And the dreams that you dream of, dreams really could come true. When I practiced that, it was a lot better, by the way. Thanks, everyone.
Well, I think we need a 5-minute break after that. That was beautiful. I'm Pam Hogg. I'm Woody's wife, and I've been Tripp's stepmother for over 32 years. He was the best son you could ever have. When Woody and I and most of the family had COVID, Tripp called every day and asked what he could bring to us, what he could get for us, because he already had the antibodies, and that was just the way Tripp is. As you can hear from all the stories, he was just always ready to lend a helping hand to anybody. The thing I remember most about Tripp, he gave the best hugs. He gave one of those hugs that both hands went in the back and slapped you on the back and just hugged you tight. And it was always a joy to give Tripp a big hug. There's a couple things I want to mention before I introduce our next guest. On October the 1st, wow. So all those who can sign up for or want to sign up for the tournament, I'm going to put papers back in the back where the auction papers are. Please fill out your name and your phone number and email address, and we'll get with you once we have it all solidified. The thing it's going to be the Hunting Hawk golf course. The other thing that you'll see back there is Tripp. Like I think someone said he loved to shop. He had, and he would only buy the best of stuff. His office was full of some of his prized possessions. He took his fish and his pictures down to Renee's house. Like someone else had mentioned to make a memorial display for him. But his other things we decided to auction off. There's a lot of ECU things, but there are also some other things too, and all of those proceeds will go to the endowment fund also. So please go back there, take a look at what's there. He does have a Joe DiMaggio signed New York Yankees cap that retails on eBay for $798. I'll put a picture of it so y'all can see. So, dig deep, it'll go to a great cause. The gentleman I went to introduce you to was very special in Kathy and Tripp's life. He married them 4+ years ago, and also he was there that night that Tripp died to help all of us get through it. Baptist church where they went regularly. He's a loving father and a doting grandfather. He's also a devoted servant to our community. May I please introduce you to Pastor Brad Hoffman.
You did great. You did great. That was good. That was good. So, I wake up most mornings, well, I wake up every morning at least, but I wake up most mornings like today, and my word for today, Kathy, was celebrate. And I think that's the word for this event today is we remember Tripp. We celebrate. We are celebrating life, and we're celebrating his life and sharing the stories. And I think I want to stick around here a couple of the other stories that nobody could talk about, like up here. I need to really know Tripp. No, but seriously, I don't think you can end this without talking about faith in Tripp, because Jesus mattered to Tripp. He was a man of faith. He trusted Christ. He knew Christ. He loved Christ, and so it was something very real to him. And so as his pastor for almost 10 years, I've had the privilege to have lots of conversations about faith. I had the privilege of performing and officiating Kathy and Tripp's ceremony as well, and even having some premarital counseling, which I think probably worked out pretty well, you know. So, but today we want to celebrate Tripp's life. So 2 things I'm going to ask you to celebrate. The first one is I'm going to ask you to celebrate the memories. And I think you've started doing that today, but there's more to come. There's more food, there's more stuff, there's more time. And so you have opportunity to celebrate the memories. God gave us the ability to recall. He gave us the ability to remember things and to celebrate those things. We have somewhat lost in our culture the ability to tell story. But as you read throughout Scripture, it's about story after story after story. People remember. People told stories about what happened. And so today, tell stories about, and hey, if you want to embellish them, it's okay. Just go ahead and embellish them. But share the stories today. The other word is not just to celebrate memories, but to celebrate hope. One of my favorite passages in Scripture is where Jesus recognizes as his disciples are somewhat troubled, they're anxious. They were anxious a lot. And on this particular occasion, they were anxious about what was happening and going on. And Jesus says, you know, I go to prepare a place for you. And I'm going to come back, and I'm going to take you with me. But to know that I am the way, the truth, and the life. You see, in Christ there is hope. In Christ there is a future. In Christ there is an eternity. As Jesus followers, I look at death as not permanent. I see it as only just a so long. We'll see you in a while. This isn't a permanent goodbye. But here's what I know about following Jesus. Scripture tells us that if we confess with our mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in our hearts that God raised him from the dead, we are saved. The word saved literally means to be rescued. Rescued from a path and saved and placed on another. That's what happens when you're born again. That's what happens when you become a Jesus follower. And many of us here are going to see Tripp again. Amen? Hey, amen. I'm Baptist, so we say amen. So today, as you celebrate the memories. God gave them to you. Tell the stories. And celebrate the hope. Because this is not it. This is not final. We will see him again. We will see many people again that know and love Jesus. Would you pray with me? Father, I thank you for the opportunity of gathering here today celebrating a life well lived. Lord, I thank you for Tripp, for his friendship. I thank you for his influence. I thank you for his grace and his care and his love for people. I thank you for the genuineness of his walk. But today, I thank you that he is yours. And he is in your presence. And one day, we too shall be in your presence and we will see him again. Father, I believe Scripture teaches that we will recognize one another again. And so we hold on to that hope. We hold on to that promise. Jesus, I pray that you would bless this family. God, you have cared for them. You've provided for them. You bless them in some amazing ways. Father, may your hand continue to be on them. May you continue to guide them for their good and for your glory. Jesus, we love you. For it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate all the kind words and sentiments. We have food, and beverages. So, everybody, feel free to come talk to the family, go eat, have a good time. It's time for the celebration.
Good job. Well, I think we all had a rough day that day, didn't we?